Well, good morning, folks. Welcome back to Three's In. Bobo's here. So now I'm going to pick up where I left off with Jay Barnes. I had a little bit more to tell you anyway. Jay was my Buddy IP at Vance. Now, the Buddy IP program was a mentoring program that lasted about 6 months after you returned from instructor pilot training. So I was assigned to Jay. And we really had a great time during my 6 months in the program. I learned a tremendous amount. And Jay, like I indicated earlier, was always willing to take the time and explain things very thoroughly. Sometimes too thoroughly, but we'll let that slide. So, I want to pick the story up in mid-1975. The Vietnam War was essentially over. Well, it was over. And we had an overage of pilots. So the Air Force had a RIF going on, a reduction in force. And boy, do I remember that. I remember coming into the shoot room, and I saw a guy, barely had known him. I don't think I'd met him, but I kind of knew who he was. And there was a note on his helmet peg. Now, our helmet pegs were steel rods, that came up like this, and then there was a softball that was put on there, and then we'd put our helmets on that softball. Well, there was a note on the helmet peg to see the ops officer. So he didn't think anything about it. He walked in, picked the note up, hung a chute in his helmet and his G-suit, and went down to the ops officer's office. And therein he was told that he had been selected for RIF, to be reduced in force, and that had been his last flight, and he was to out-process within 2 weeks. Swell. And man, that's something we all feared at that time, because you just didn't know when the Prince of Darkness was going to put a note on your helmet peg. At any rate, things were going along kind of normal until, I imagine, mid-August, late September. And I need to think how we did this. I think in one of our Buddy IP sessions, we were talking about telling students how and when they washed out. And this is really sacrilegious, I'll give you that. One of these sick ideas we came up with was, if you have a kid that's going to wash out, why don't you just go grab his softball off the helmet peg and give it to him as a memento from pilot training? You could have everybody in the class sign it. I know it was tacky, and I'm probably going to get my feet held to the fire for that stunt. But at any rate, I needed to back that in to make the story flow. So I come into the flight room one day, about midday, and there's Jay sitting in the flight commander's office. He was the assistant flight commander at that time. And I walk in, and he's sitting there with a softball, flipping it up and catching it, and flipping it up and catching it. I said, Jay, what's up? And he says, oh, I've just been riffed. You got to be shitting me. He says, no. He says, I took a hit. Well, we got to talking about it, and Jay shared with me that before I got to Vance, he had been on a low-level mission with a student. Now, our low levels in those days were flown at 5,000 feet. You got to be shitting me. 5,000 feet, you can get hypoxia on a low-level mission at that altitude. Anyway, at the furthest point away from Vance, at 5,000 feet, out in western Oklahoma, Jay noticed that the fuel had really begun to drop off. He'd noticed it was a little bit below a checkpoint earlier, and he noticed it was going a little bit lower, but when he got the furthest out, he saw where it was significantly lower. Well, holy crap. Also, at that time, he noticed that they were being beat up a little bit by unusual thermals. Now, in Vance, Oklahoma, and in Texas, when it got real hot, we'd pick up these thermals when we were flying at low level. And they'd kind of bounce the airplane around. You didn't think too much about it. But Jay thought, you know what, this is a little bit more than usual. So he just told the student, he said, hey, take your speed brake, go to neutral with it. We had a 3-position switch in the front cockpit on the right throttle. So the kid took the switch, went to neutral, and then pushed it back up. And Jay heard a clunk, which was the speed brake retracting, and then things really smoothed out quite a bit. Oh crap. Somehow the speed brake had gotten deployed. So he looked at his gas and he computed the route back to Vance, and he had, crap, I don't know if we're going to make it or not. And there wasn't any other suitable airfields to divert to. So Jay took the airplane, pointed it directly at Vance, called up center, declared an emergency, and began to climb up into the mid-40s. 40,000 is what was our procedure at that time. So he climbed way up into the 40s with his emergency. And then when he got up there, was able to bring the power to idle and start downhill. So he starts downhill, and he's coming in perpendicular to the runway, to runway 17 right. So he just called up Shoehorn, our RSU out there, and told him, he said, hey, listen, I'm coming in, I've declared an emergency. He says, I am out of gas. And he said, I'm just going to come in, turn base, and land. And they cleared everybody out for him. And that's exactly what he did. He came in, cleared, turned base, gear flaps, landed, touchdown, and on rollout, one of the engines flamed out. And then as he cleared the runway, the other engine flamed out. If that's not quite exact, it's pretty darn close to what happened. So in order to teach Jay a lesson, and everybody else in the squadron, Jay got fanged on an OER, an officer efficiency report. And at that time, as you might imagine, with that rift going on, it was very, very competitive. And so he took a hit. And, okay, and Jay said, I screwed up. Maybe I deserved it. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. He saved the jet. But in those days, I don't know why. I'd call him in. Jay, did you learn anything from it? I don't know. It never sat well with me. But the problem was the next OER, Officer Effectiveness reporting system, or cycle, he took another hit. What the hell? The guy's down. What are you beating him up for? So he took a second hit. And it was those two ERs that drove him as a candidate to be a candidate for reduction in force. Well, hell, I walked in, I sat down with Jay, and he took it. He was upset about it, of course, but he took it in stride, more or less, and just kind of resigned to it. I said, Jay, no. This is, and he showed me the two ERs, and both of them referenced that same incident. I said, they can't do that. I said, let's go through the appeal system and appeal that second ER and get that thrown out or something. So that's what we did. Jay got the appropriate paperwork for an appeal, a records review, and he was taken out of the squadron. I think they moved him up to academics. He still was flying with us, but so he goes up to academics, and I can't remember how long the appeal system took. I'm thinking about 8 or 9 months. And 8 or 9 months later, he comes down and he said, hey, I'm going to put my softball back on the peg. He says, I'm back in. And they agreed with the argument that Jay presented, and he won. He won the appeal. And then he got a C-141 when he came up for assignment, and that's when he left Vance. But he was good-natured about it, to say the least, and he fought the system. He had a great case, and he won it, and he saved the jet, for crying out loud. God bless him. I was so glad to hear that. He went on C-141s, and then I think at one point he got out of C-141s, went to the airlines, and then he joined the reserves and continued 141s, and I believe he retired off the C-17 as it was just beginning to come in service. But he had a great career at that point. Jay, you'll always be in my heart. You'll be a fond memory. We had some great times. And I'll tell you another story about him and a couple other knotheads that we all flew together on cross countries. At any rate, thanks for tuning in, and I'll be back with you soon. This is Bobo Bass Gear Stop.